In the 16th century, Spanish conquistadors gazed upon a sea which no European had ever sailed before, the great Pacific Ocean. They were the first of many to venture into its waters during that bold era of exploration. The Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, and the British were all racing to touch the distant corners of the world, to lay claim to whatever treasures may have been hidden there. Somewhere in that vast ocean was the legendary continent Terra Australis Incognita. Stories about its fabled shores have been told for centuries, but no European had actually seen it. When the explorers at last set foot upon its beaches, it soon became clear that this was a land unlike any other, filled with the mysterious, the dangerous, and the unexpected. This strange world was a secret that nature had kept from the rest of the planet. It was a time capsule in which life evolved unhampered by many of the influences that shaped the rest of the world. This was Australia. The powers that forged the continent were born far back in time, back beyond the Romans and their mighty conquests and huge empires. Back beyond the Greeks and their gods, beyond the Egyptians and their timeless monuments, beyond the age of the great dinosaurs, beyond the beginnings of life in the sea and its emergence onto land. Back to the time of the birth of the land. $225 million years ago, all the continents were united in a landmass known as Pangaea. Gradually, the mass began to break up, forming supercontinents, which in turn drifted apart to form the continents we know today. About 65 million years ago, Australia broke free from the southern supercontinent and began moving north. Isolated in the vast Pacific Ocean, it followed its own path of evolution. Over the eons, huge changes wreaked havoc with the land. The giants that had ruled perished. The sea levels rose and fell with the ice ages, As the earth froze and water was drained away from the oceans, the atmosphere dried up and rainfall diminished. The lush interior vanished, giving way to vast stretches of parched earth. All these monumental changes drastically affected the life that was developing. When Australia's first human inhabitants, the Aborigines, arrived more than 40,000 years ago, Australia already boasted a wild array of creatures found nowhere else on Earth. This was the strange paradise that awaited those first Europeans so many centuries later. To the early explorers, Australia seemed like the world turned upside down. The seasons were reversed. The trees shed their bark instead of their leaves. Swans were black instead of white. But a Dutch book that had been published in 1593 foreshadowed what they would find in that alien world. In the book, each corner of the earth was represented by a different animal. Europe by the horse, Asia the camel, the lion for Africa. The fourth corner was symbolized by an unknown creature, one with a pouch. The explorers were to find that the drawing did indeed represent the fourth corner of the world. In 1770, Captain James Cook's famed expedition reached Australia's eastern shore. The men were confounded by an animal they glimpsed there. The native peoples the explorers met called the animal kangaroo. It was the first Aboriginal word to enter the English language. The kangaroo has become virtually synonymous with Australia. It has flourished here, able to survive on grasses and leaves that few other animals can digest. Kangaroos belong to Australia's preeminent order of mammals, the marsupials. As in other parts of the world, the mammals had inherited the earth, but those that dominated Australia were different. Marsupials, like all mammals, are born through an external opening, but the same opening is used for all the functions of reproduction and elimination. Using only its forearms, the newborn climbs through the fur and into the safety of the pouch. It attaches itself to a nipple and continues to grow. By some extraordinary alchemy, the kangaroo can feed different milk formula through different teats to the newborn in the pouch and to her older offspring. Today, kangaroos outnumber humans in Australia. The animals are prolific and diverse, including more than 40 different species. Largest are the giant red kangaroos, as heavy as a man. The early settlers thought them nothing but mild-looking murderers, but they are in fact silent and timid. While the red kangaroos abound in the open plains and outback, many of the small rat kangaroos, thought to be the most primitive of the species, roam the floor of Australia's immense eucalypt forests. They differ from their cousins not only in size, but in behavior. The rufous rat kangaroo, for instance, does not eat leaves and grasses, but roots, insects, and worms. In the woodlands of Western Australia lives one of the continent's rarest marsupials. The numbat is a most unusual member of its order. It has no pouch, though the young do cling to their mother's underbelly. Though most marsupials are nocturnal, the numbat is active during the day. It must stay constantly on the alert because it is highly visible to predators. The honey possum, also found in Western Australia, is among the most specialized animals in the world. With its brush-tipped tongue, it licks the pollen and nectar off plants and scrapes it off against its tiny teeth. The honey possum is a misnomer, for it is not a possum at all, but the sole marsupial survivor of some ancient, mysterious evolutionary group. In 1788, the British created the colony of New South Wales on the Australian continent. They peopled it almost exclusively with convicts. 10 years later, the colonial governor ordered an expedition, which included prisoners, to venture into unexplored territory. They were looking for a white settlement, rumored to exist across the mountains. The group was led by a former convict, John Wilson, who had lived with the Aborigines for years. Young John Price, assistant to the governor, was also sent. There was no hidden world across the mountains, but the journey was still one of discovery for the colonists. In a single memorable day, John Price saw no less than 3 animals unlike any he had ever come across. One he described this way: there's an animal which the natives called colloween, which much resembles the sloths of America. 5 years after Price's report in 1803, the Sydney Gazette offered the first public account of the koala. The marsupial did not make a big impression on the early settlers, however, with its limited repertoire of eating and sleeping. In prehistoric times, there were many types of koalas. In an evolutionary sense, the animal is now in the twilight of its reign. On the same day that Price spotted the koala, the expedition found the dung of an animal called a wombat by the Aborigines. The wombat, Price wrote, has short legs, a thick body, very small eyes, is very fat, and has much the appearance of the badger. The wombat is, in fact, the marsupial equivalent of the badger, in that it lives underground. The first sighting of Australia's lyrebird was over the barrel of a gun. Price's report went like this: "Here I shot a bird about the size of a pheasant, but the tail of it much resembles a peacock. Despite its tail, the lyrebird is not related to the pheasant or the peacock. Its name was inspired by the feathers that suggest the ancient Greek instrument, the lyre. One of the world's great mimics, the lyrebird can imitate most of the other bird calls it hears. Its talents go farther. It has also been heard imitating the sounds of hammering, violins, pianos, and even a teamster's orders to his men. As the early settlers moved inland from the beaches to the bush, they encountered more strange sights. In the uppermost branches of the forest, they caught glimpses of animals like creatures of fantasy, half bird and half mammal. In fact, they were a remarkably adapted group of possums. In order to travel from treetop to treetop, as the rainforest thinned out in primeval times, they had acquired the ability to glide. Gliders soar by means of a special membrane that developed between their arms and legs. They thrive on the sap and flowers of the ubiquitous gum trees and are unique to this part of the world. In 1798, a thoroughly improbable animal turned up in the British Museum, sent from the newly explored continent. It puzzled the biologists who suspected a hoax. After all, how could an animal exist that had a duck's bill and a beaver's tail? But the platypus was real, and it formed a link between reptiles and mammals. Like reptiles, it lays eggs, a fact that was hotly debated for 80 years. Like mammals, it grows hair and suckles its young. A relic of a much earlier time on our planet, the platypus is a living fossil that first wriggled through prehistoric swamps millions of years ago. The platypus is a monotreme, an elite order which includes only one other Australian animal, the echidna or spiny anteater. Although a close relative of the platypus, the echidna is much less at home in the water, but it has its own talents. When pestered, it can dig itself into a fortified position, ready to withstand any siege. At the turn of the 19th century, when Napoleon was rising to the height of his power, he sent a scientific expedition to Australia. The trip had the support of the Empress Josephine, an avid natural history buff who had her own private zoo. The expedition leader, Nicolas Baudin, sent back among the specimens an unusual bird, the black emu. Smaller than the common emu, Baudin had found the bird on an island off Tasmania. Sadly, it was exterminated in short order by the settlers. Little remains of the black emu other than these illustrations and this skeleton in the Paris Museum. The common emu, however, still thrives despite its unusual method of caring for its young. As soon as the hen has laid her eggs, she leaves the nest and shows little further interest. It is the male who takes over the task of incubation, sitting almost continuously on the eggs for 8 weeks. Even after they hatch, the male bears most of the responsibility of parenthood. Emus are flightless and tower to 6 feet in height. A highly successful species, they are found over much of the continent. By 1845, the era of inland exploration in Australia was well underway. A little-known naturalist named John Gilbert set out on a 3,000-mile journey to cross the country. In the rainforest of the Northeast, he found enormous mounds that were thought by some to be Aboriginal graves. Gilbert, however, was the first European to spot the real, if unlikely, builders, birds. There are 3 different species of mound builders in Australia, of which the brush turkey is the largest. The mounds are ingenious artificial egg incubators. The birds scratch together tons of soil and leaf litter. The rotting vegetation, like a compost heap, generates heat and warms the eggs. The birds regulate the temperature by adding or subtracting material. The rainforests of Australia are a remnant of the great tropical ages some 65 million years ago. As rainfall diminished, the forest shrunk. Today, only a few isolated areas are left of these once vast regions. As the rainforest dwindled, so did the number of animals relying on them. A handful of species is all that is left of a once astonishing array of animals. Many of them cannot live anywhere else. The rainforests are their last refuge. Hidden among the lush foliage is the flightless and prehistoric-looking cassowary. Its helmet is an evolutionary mystery. One theory suggests it protects the bird as it runs through the tangled undergrowth. 5 feet tall, the cassowary is thought to be a relative of some of the largest birds that ever lived. Once, extensive inland lakes were common in Australia, but most of them vanished over the ages of climatic change. Today, the wetlands may be completely dry for years. But with storms, they reappear, and with them, a host of nomadic water birds. These birds have an uncanny ability to sense when the wetlands have returned, though they may be great distances away. They have no regular breeding season, but mate when there's an abundance of water and food to support the young. When the waters dry up, the birds, too, disappear. Many early inhabitants of the wetlands did not survive the brutal climactic changes of the eons, but one did endure. In fact, it has remained unchanged for nearly 200 million years. The crocodile is indeed a surviving relic from the age of the dinosaur. They are Australia's largest predators. The freshwater crocodile, which can stay submerged for up to 2 hours, is unique to the continent. It makes an easy meal of fish, small reptiles, and even mammals, but it is timid and not dangerous to man. The saltwater crocodile is a different story. One of the largest and most dangerous of its species on Earth. It grows up to 25 feet in length and can live up to 100 years. It needs only one meal a week and will tackle anything from a turtle to a buffalo. Whatever comes near the riverbank risks attack. Coming ashore to nest, the female lays her eggs in large grass mounds. The newly hatched crocodile breaks out of its leathery shell by using a specialized egg tooth. Only 8 to 12 inches when hatched, it has little to fear once grown. Among the mangroves and mudflats of Australia is another evolutionary eccentric. The mud skipper is a fish that spends more time on land than it does in the water, breathing by storing water in gill chambers. The history of Australia's environment is a history of paradise lost. Dense, lush forests replaced by a scorched and searing hell. Few animals were able to adapt to the intense heat and lack of water. Those that did have become the triumphant rulers of the desert kingdom. Some of these are from the dasyurid family, marsupials with a difference. They are all ferocious flesh eaters, unlike their herbivore relatives. Their food must supply water as well as nutrients. Most of these animals rarely drink. To avoid the sun, some dasyurids are burrowers. They spend the day in cool air beneath the desert sands, and only at night do they emerge to hunt. But the greatest desert burrower is not a dasyurid, but the bilby. This marsupial can dig itself a cool refuge in a matter of minutes. Other victors in the struggle to conquer the relentless environment are the reptiles. They survive and flourish, reflecting the cruel environment that produced them. It is no coincidence that slithering through Australia's deserts are some of the world's most dangerous snakes. Australia is a land of mystery. Hidden behind as many faces are creatures of camouflage and disguise. The thorny devil is a master of illusion. In the guise of a demon, this soft-spined lizard is nothing but a tiny, timid ant killer. The frillneck is another imposter. Using its frightening facade to become a master of bluff, it spits and hisses angrily at intruders. But if that doesn't work, it beats a quick retreat. More dangerous is the giant parenti. At lengths reaching up to 7 feet, it is the desert's largest reptile. With skin as tough as the ground it treads on, this carnivore is a formidable aggressor, a ruler among reptiles. Not all desert inhabitants are so bizarre in appearance. In the rugged terrain of Australia's arid zones dwells the rock wallaby. Some 2 feet tall, it is adept at escaping from the heat into the shade of the rocks. When evening falls in Australia, a creature emerges that possesses a gift no other mammal has, the gift of flight. Bats are one of the world's most successful mammals, and Australia boasts its share of them, including the flying fox. Though many bats have poor vision, flying foxes are endowed with keen eyesight. They feed on fruit during the night, swallowing the juice and seeds, which makes them important seed dispersers in the eucalypt forests. Days are reserved for sleeping. These much maligned creatures are caring mothers and gentle, sensitive animals. They communicate intimately and interact using touch, smell, eye contact, and hearing. Like humans, the young bat seeks its mother's embrace. Life in the colony has strict rules of etiquette, which the young must learn to follow, or risk the wrath of the elders. The true bats, with their specialized nose and ears, are equipped with one of the most sophisticated skills of all animals, the ability to echolocate. Like a ship's radar, the bats generate ultrasound that helps them navigate their way through thousands of their fellow creatures. They virtually never collide, a feat they could not achieve through sight alone. The animals of Australia had the continent to themselves for millions of years. But all that changed with the impact of human beings on Australia, beginning some 40,000 years ago with the era of the Aborigine. This was a new threat in the bush. The Aborigines used a group hunting technique, which was savagely effective. To assist their hunting, the clans used fire as a tool. By deliberately burning vegetation and waiting for fresh growth to appear, the Aborigines enticed animals into areas where they could be readily hunted. Exactly how Australia's animals were affected by the Aborigines will never be known, but they may have caused extinctions by hunting or by altering the environment through burning. Another new and dangerous element appeared in the land when seafaring groups from the north reached the Australian shores. These people brought animals bred from the wild dogs of Asia. Soon they broke the leash and became the ancestors of Australia's wild dog, the dingo. No such animal had existed on the continent before, and it had little competition. The dingoes found themselves in a paradise. As they multiplied, some had to leave the coast for a new territory further inland. Their assault on the native wildlife began in earnest. Dingoes sometimes hunt in packs, preying on large game in an organized effort. They are able to catch and kill the biggest of the kangaroos. The dogs had an enormous impact on the animals of Australia. They feared no other predator and reigned supreme. No single event in the history of Australia's animals has had such a profound effect as when the Europeans reached the continent some 200 years ago. The march of explorers and settlers extracted a heavy toll as land was cleared for livestock and crops. Flocks of sheep spilled over the hills and onto the inland plains, leaving few areas free from intrusion. Alien animals appeared, brought by settlers as beasts of burden. As they escaped or were set free, many became bizarre additions to the local wildlife. The buffalo from Indonesia fared well in the tropical swamps. The rabbit, imported for sport, flourished in its new environment. A host of other creatures, from the mundane to the exotic, swelled the ranks and added to the competition for Australia's resources. As the land was cleared by people or destroyed by introduced animals, many species were endangered. The gentle numbat has suffered a drastic decline, driven from his natural range into one small area of Western Australia. Not all the danger was in loss of habitat. Some species were simply hunted to the brink of extinction. The Tasmanian tiger was one such animal. Because it preyed on sheep, the farmers shot, trapped, and poisoned the animal into oblivion. The government intervened, but it was too late. The last known Tasmanian tiger died in captivity more than 50 years ago, just months after protective legislation was enacted. There is a possibility that the tiger survives somewhere in the misty hills, but it is the faintest of hopes. Ironically, some species have actually benefited from European settlement. Many desert animals were protected from their harsh environment because the early pioneers made available something the desert rarely had: water. Of all the animals, the red and gray kangaroos prospered the most. Before the European settlers arrived, they had to endure severe droughts. But when underground water was brought to the surface, the kangaroos were presented with an unintentional gift. Today, the effects of civilization have reached far into the Australian wilderness. As the demand for resources increases, exploitation of the land intensifies. Already, Australia has lost 2/3 of its original forests. Only 1/4 of the magnificent rainforests remain. What was once a vast wilderness has been forever altered by people and technology. Remarkably, many animals have survived the transformation. Even in the most hostile environments, animals have adapted and even flourished. People and animals are coexisting with mutual benefits, and many species have learned to live in peace in their urban refuge. Perhaps the most hopeful symbol of a happy compromise between civilization and wildlife is the koala. In the early days of settlement, the animal's soft fur made it a favorite target for hunters. They were slaughtered by the millions, and the species almost perished. In the late 20s, public pressure caused the government to act to protect the koala, and it began to rebound. Its gentle face and amiable temperament are once more a part of the Australian wilderness. The koala has become a universal symbol of the continent. Australia seems a land without limit, and in fact, new animals are still being discovered. Yet a clear and present danger confronts this wilderness and its creatures. Once the most isolated continent on Earth, Australia has caught up to its distant neighbors in an astonishingly short space of time. The seal on this drifting time capsule has been broken open forever, revealing the startling, striking, and unduplicated world of Australia's improbable animals.